Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to start here right on time. My name is Jen Hopi Ferguson, and I'll be your moderator today. This is one of our favorite parts of Emergency Preparedness Week, and that is welcoming everybody to talk earthquakes. We love to know how to be safe when the earth shakes. And so I'll just start and identify that I am joining today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw and Coast Salish people, also known as Nanaimo. And very grateful to live and work and play in such a beautiful space, and grateful to the Snuneymuxw people for stewarding this land for us. My colleagues will share where they're from as they introduce themselves today, but I'll do just a very brief intro. So Allison and Dr. John Cassidy are from Natural Resources Canada, and they're going to be talking a little bit about the earthquake early warning system and all the other fun things around seismology. I call them my seismo friends. So sometimes we call Allison Seismo Gal. So, you could, John is the earthquake guy, Allison Seismo Gal. Anita Ansari is our friend from BC Hydro, and we have Jeri Grant joining us as well from the Capital Regional District. She is based in Juan Fuca, I guess. Sorry, Jeri. Juan Fuca, and she's based in Souk. So they will share a little bit about each of them, but I think we'll just jump right in, and I'll just invite our classes. So Miss Eldon's class and Miss Laxton's class, if you would have any questions at any point along the way, you are welcome to go ahead and type those into the chat. You can also type them into the Q&A. And so if folks are on their own device and they want to do that, that's perfectly okay. Or you can feel free to do that on their behalf. We're happy to take questions at any point. And we will also do a few polls. So I think before I turn things over to Allison and John, I'm going to just put our first poll up. And that first poll is, and you can just answer those. So the first question here is, having lots of small earthquakes are good as it releases the pressure on the earth and makes a big earthquake less likely. Is that true, false, or maybe you're not sure? We've got one answer for true. We'll give the other class a second here to slot in their answer.
Ms. Laxton's class is saying that they need the poll again.
It's still up, so it might be that it's tucked behind your screen. Or you can just type in the answer in the chat too. True, false, or you're not sure. So the question is, having lots of small earthquakes are good as it releases the pressure in the earth, making a big earthquake less likely. Is that true, false? There we go, true. Okay, Dr. John and Allison, this is, so here we go. I'm sharing here now. You can see that they both say that that's true. Who wants to myth bust this for us? Maybe we'll start with John. Oh, go ahead, Allison.
No, I was going to say go for it, John. So
okay. Sad to say, it is not true. Most people would believe that it is true that these small earthquakes release the energy, but they are so small because of the way earthquakes work, and we'll talk a bit about that later. The small earthquakes release just a drop in the bucket compared to a large earthquake like a magnitude 7 or 8 or 9. So sadly, not true.
Very common, very, very common for folks to think that those little kind of, I call them micro earthquakes, but that's not really the seismological term, but those smaller quakes that they would release the pressure, right? But you've told me before how we'd have to have thousands and thousands of small earthquakes in order to release a subsequent pressure of perhaps a larger quake like a 7.0 or an 8.0. Do you want to just touch a little bit on sort of the magnitude difference?
Sure. So the magnitude scale is a factor of 10. So as you go from say a magnitude 3 earthquake that you might just barely feel shaking, if you go from a 3 to a 4, the shaking of a 4 is 10 times stronger. For a magnitude 5, the shaking is 100 times stronger. For a big magnitude 9 off of our coast, it's 1,000,000 times stronger. So it goes up really, really quickly. That's in terms of ground shaking. And in terms of energy release, it goes up by 32 times for each magnitude unit. So it may not seem like much going from a 3 to a 4, but it's 10 times stronger shaking, 33 times more energy. And also the duration of shaking, how long you'll feel strong shaking in the area that's impacted. So things change really, really quickly in the earthquake world with magnitude, because it's a logarithmic scale. So a factor of 10 for each increase in the magnitude.
Awesome. Thanks, John. This is maybe a good segue. And Allison, you can give us maybe a little bit of an overview on the earthquake early warning system coming soon to British Columbia and broadly to Canada. So you're going to share your...
we were gonna give a presentation. I was gonna talk about earthquake early warning at the end of it, but yeah, if you can, stay calm. It's coming. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. It didn't let me know when you can see that. Good. Okay. I will. Okay, so John, over to you.
Okay, just to introduce myself, John Cassidy. I'm an earthquake seismologist with Natural Resources Canada, and I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Wasanich people here on southern Vancouver Island. British Columbia is a really active earthquake zone, and the reason for that is that just offshore, these blue lines that you see are major faults that separate tectonic plates. So the North American plate that we all live on, just offshore is the Pacific plate, just west of Haida Gwaii, and off of southern Vancouver Island, you see another tectonic plate, the one to Fuca. So these plates are moving at about the same speed that your fingernails grow, and that's ultimately the cause of earthquakes along the West Coast and throughout the province. We record more than 2,000 earthquakes each and every year across British Columbia. Most of them are offshore. That's where the largest earthquakes are and the most frequent. But you also see earthquakes along the coast throughout Vancouver Island, and even as you move inland into the Okanagan and into the Rocky Mountains. So the entire province is a very active earthquake zone with the highest hazard along the West Coast.
Right. And we've got this short video. This is from the Kobe earthquake, showing the kind of shaking from caught by a security camera. You're only seeing less than 10 seconds of shaking, but the shaking actually continued for a whole minute and a half. It gives you an idea of the big side-to-side motion you get in earthquakes. Okay. Oops, that's good. What? Okay, so a little bit about the types of damage you can see in earthquakes. Most of the damage tends to be in old brick buildings or old stone buildings. And you can see in this badly damaged building, if people had gotten underneath that table, it's in the top part of the picture, they would have been actually quite nicely protected from even this collapse of the top floor, and not nearly as safe if they tried to exit out of that doorway, because a lot of bricks came down. Often the most dangerous place to be is around the outside edge of a building. It's better to be in the interior corners, and of course underneath that furniture that's going to protect you from falling debris. This is a badly reinforced column in Kobe, Japan. There's great rebar going up the columns and along the beams, but very little what we call transverse or wrapped reinforcement, the stuff that holds that together so it can stay linear and do its job and hold things up. And this beam is now being held up by a Coke machine, which is not structurally sound. Houses, despite this image, houses tend to do quite well in earthquakes. Usually our houses are built of wood, which is flexible. It's relatively light. It does quite nicely in earthquakes. But what tends to fail are things like porches, the chimneys, especially dangerous if they fall toward the house. So I have a chimney in my house, and I've put extra planks around where that chimney goes through the attic, so that if the chimney falls toward the house, those bricks don't come through to the floors below where we are. And then, of course, garages. You've got a big open space. It's not very structurally strong, so garages often will sort of collapse a little bit. So those are the main kinds of damage that we tend to see in earthquakes. Also, I have to say that the structural damage is actually quite rare in North America, in our earthquakes. You're more likely to be injured by falling stuff that's in your house or in your office. So things that come off shelves, furniture that shifts, light fixtures, which is why it's a really good idea to secure things so that this sort of thing isn't a hazard to you.
So tsunamis. Tsunamis are not just a wave. A lot of people think it's a single wave that comes ashore. It's actually a series of ocean waves that can continue for hours. And the first wave that you see may not be the largest. So tsunamis are generated by large earthquakes offshore. They can also be caused by other things, meteorite impacts or landslides, volcanoes beneath the ocean. So there are many things that can initiate a tsunami. But the really big ones are caused by earthquakes, and they're caused by the movement, ultimately the movement of the seafloor and vertical movement of the seafloor. So big subduction earthquakes, like we see on the left here, where an ocean plate is being pushed beneath a continent, exactly what's happening along our west coast off of Vancouver Island. The movement of these plates can be as much as 30 or 40 or 50 meters during one of these magnitude 9 earthquakes. So it's the vertical movement that starts the waves moving, and in the open ocean, they travel at about the same speed as a jet. So they're traveling at 700 or 800 kilometers per hour. So for very distant earthquakes, Japan, Alaska, we can have several hours of warning, but for nearby earthquakes, we're talking about minutes, 10 minutes or less even in some cases, but 10 minutes or maybe an hour and a half in Victoria, a couple of hours in Vancouver. So we do have some warning from offshore earthquakes, but landslides that are triggered by nearby earthquakes, you may only have a few minutes. So certainly the model on the right-hand side shows models of wave amplitudes and arrival times that we can expect from an offshore subduction zone earthquake. So these are available if you'd like more information, and but certainly something to be aware of if you feel strong shaking. If you feel strong shaking that lasts for more than 30 seconds or up to a minute, that's your warning to move to high ground, whether you're by the ocean or by a lake, because landslides that have been triggered may go into a lake and cause very large waves. So, you know, there's a lot of information out there on tsunamis, how to prepare and what to expect. And it's a good thing to become familiar with if you are near any large body of water.
Yes, I have to say I have a healthy respect for tsunami, and whenever I'm at Long Beach, I'm planning where I'm going to run if I feel strong shaking. It's just a good thing to do. Okay, so after an earthquake, we can end up with a kind of uncomfortable situation. We may not have water, sewage, electricity, or internet for some time, possibly even weeks. This is a map of Christchurch 2 weeks after their earthquake. The red neighborhoods have no services. Yellow have some services. So these are people who are essentially camping. And that lower left image is essentially the glamour of your life for a little while. So it's a really good idea that when you put your kit together, you're thinking about ways to make yourself comfortable after an earthquake, not just surviving, but making sure you're comfortable so that you're getting through things and not too unpleasantly. John?
So what can we do? There are a lot of things that can be done to be prepared for an earthquake or tsunami. And the number one is checking with your local community in the province and ShakeOutBC for all of this great information. Have a kit, have a plan, be prepared for up to 2 weeks on your own. And there's great information on the Get Prepared website as well. Some simple things that you can do: have shoes and a flashlight under your bed. Look at the rooms where you spend the most time in your home, in your office, and be prepared. So being able to move around in the dark and avoiding broken glass is why we have shoes and flashlights under our bed. strapping heavy objects, bookcases, water tanks to the wall, so they're not going to fall over and block your exit from a room. Having camping supplies to be able to camp out after an earthquake, and having a good first aid kit and water and batteries, flashlights. So there's a lot you can do. Masks that we've all become very familiar with, very helpful after a large earthquake where you have dust and contaminants thrown up. Store heavy items on lower shelves. Again, just stability of keeping things from falling over.
Yep, that's great.
That's it.
I certainly, when I'm putting my food away, when I come home from the grocery store, all the heavy cans and stuff, they go down low, and all the light stuff like chips and cereal go up high, because they're not going to hurt me. But those cans can be really quite painful if they get tossed toward your head. Yeah, so we practice the Great British Columbia Shakeout every October. It's a really good idea to think about that, not just at school, but when you're at home. Where will you go in each room of your house if there's an earthquake? If you're in bed, you stay in bed. You turn onto your stomach and you put a pillow over your head and just ride it out. But what about other rooms? What would you get underneath? If there's no furniture to get underneath, is there a nice interior corner away from hazards? You could squat down and cover your head and neck. Of course, knowing what to do if you're driving, you're not driving yet, most of these students, but thinking about, pulling over somewhere safe, setting your parking brake, different things to do in different situations, and just practicing those so that they become instinctive, because earthquakes are stressful situations and brains don't function very well under stress, and the instinct is to run, and that's one of the worst things you can do. So by practicing, you're creating that muscle memory, and hopefully your body takes you to that safe space when there's an earthquake.
So after an earthquake, and again, this is all part of the planning and being aware of what to expect, having a kit, having a plan, and using your plan. Don't use your phone unless it's really important. You can use text messages. They have a much lower bandwidth. Expect aftershocks. Almost all earthquakes have aftershocks, and they can be large. They can also be damaging. So it's important to be aware of aftershocks that will occur. Move away from the coast if you feel strong shaking. We talked about this just a few minutes ago. So long and strong shaking is your warning that a tsunami may be on its way. So be aware of that.
Yep. Great. Thanks, John. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the earthquake early warning system that's being launched in BC this month. So earthquake early warning is a technology that's been proven effective in other countries. They use it in Japan, Taiwan, Mexico, several other places, and more recently in California, Oregon, and Washington. So the fact that we're getting it in BC is a big deal, and it's a really wonderful system. So the system is triggered by the P waves. That's the little rumble or jolt you might experience from the earthquake. They're the faster waves. That's a primary or pressure wave. So they get triggered onto the sensors. The data goes to the data center, and the alert is sent out before the arrival of the strong S waves. That's the secondary or shear waves. That's the big side-to-side motion that tends to cause a lot of damage in earthquakes. This system can provide seconds to tens of seconds of warning. You can do a lot with even just a few seconds to really reduce the impacts of an earthquake. You can stop trains and all sorts of things like that. So this little cartoon shows you how the system works. So that's alert sent out, and those big damaging the red wave that's been going through there, everything stopped, everyone's alerted, and so they're prepared for that shaking that's about to happen. Now, the warning times vary. It depends on how close you are to the earthquake, what kind of mechanism you're being alerted by, like cell service you're getting alerted by, the depth of the earthquake, all sorts of things are factors. But generally speaking, you'll get at least a few seconds warning, and that's really valuable. So this is not prediction. This is detecting an earthquake and alerting you right away. So the alerts are based on the magnitude of the earthquake. That's how big the earthquake is itself, and also the intensity. That's the strength of shaking. So depending how far away you are, the intensity will vary. The closer you are, the stronger the shaking. And then we're only going to be alerting you if the shaking is likely to be harmful. So if it's just a little rumble, you probably won't get an alert. We don't want to bother you with that and wake you up. So the alert will come to cell phones, radio, television. It'll say to drop, cover, hold on, protect yourself. And this is a really great system. Automated alerts to the critical infrastructure will do things like stopping trains, having alarms in hospitals so you stop surgery, opening fire hall ambulance bay doors so that they don't get jammed shut. Those vehicles can still get out and help people. Stopping planes from landing on a runway that's moving, stopping traffic from going onto bridges or into tunnels, moving elevators to the nearest floor and opening the doors so people don't get trapped, securing equipment, closing valves. You've protected your water source, but you've also protected the environment from hazardous chemicals. Even parking your hard drive, you're protecting your software and your data so that people can still be operational. Organizations can still be operational after the earthquake, and getting those generators ready so that they can continue with some power. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Great. Thanks so much, Allison and John. Great info. I think the thing that's really important, you highlighted lots of important things, and I put a couple of resources that you mentioned into the chat. So our friend Dr. Wendy Bohan has a great video on YouTube that talks about magnitude and sort of, she uses spaghetti to demonstrate, what John was speaking to. So I think that's a great tool for teachers and instructors and faculty to use. I also put a link to the Prepared BC resources. So there's tons of great info there, how to be ready in your home. And Jeri and I are going to talk a little bit more about that. But you also highlighted two places that in the last few months I've had the opportunity to visit, which is Christchurch and Kobe. And I think it's important to sort of state both of those earthquakes were 7.2, 7.3. So not what we might see on the, extreme end of the earthquake, the seismology, the Richter scale, if you will. So, a 7.3 caused really significant damage in Japan. And so, and also in 7.2 in Christchurch. And so, that ability to be prepared and to sort of recognize what this feels like and that it is going to take time for us to come out the other side. I think John also did a great explanation of tsunamis too, and that it isn't always the first wave that is the strongest. It's often could be the third or the fourth wave, and with that comes debris, and of course, there's risk associated with that. So I've got two poll questions that I'm gonna pop up here for folks, and we'll see if they were paying attention. I feel like this is a good quiz, but we will. Oh, there you go. So our questions are already up, and so we've got, where is the safest place to be during an earthquake? And folks nailed it, under a table or a desk. I think it was important to sort of restate. We continue to see that sort of myth that standing in a doorway is the safest place. That used to be information that we used to share. Allison, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it used to be a doorway because there was an image of a doorway that survived an earthquake really well, and people figured because of that, let's get in a doorway. The problem is that most doorways in homes, especially these days, are not structural, so they don't provide any shelter, and doors tend to really slam violently in an earthquake. So if there's a door in that doorway, you could actually end up getting injured by it. So it's much better to even just squat beside an interior wall than get into a doorway.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to for some reason these are coming up all at once, but let's just go to question number 3. So if you want to scroll down to number 3, the poll question, which is, if you or someone in your family uses a mobility device like a wheelchair or a walker, and there's an earthquake, what should you do? Should you get out of your chair or your walker? Should you try to go outside? Or should you lock, cover, and hold on? So Allison mentioned drop, covering, and hold on. And I'll just note for folks, if you have a mobility device, the alert just came through. I hope everybody got that on their device. That is a test of the system in British Columbia, and that of course was happening today at 10:55. So you should got a notification. If an alarm went off in your school, I'm sorry. That happens. But you can also type into the chat. So of those 3 questions, if you or someone in your family was using a mobility device, like a wheelchair or walker, and there was an earthquake, what should you do? Should you get out of your chair? Should you go outside? Or should you lock, cover, and hold on? You can type those answers into the chat for our teachers if that's easier. I'll just give you a minute to do that. People may be recovering from the sound, alerting in everybody's backpack. Okay, so the correct answer is that we should lock, cover, and hold on. So we want to lock our chair or our wheelchair. Ideally, we're trying to cover our head and neck if that's possible, and want to be in an interior wall as close to the wall as possible, so that we can try to be safe and minimize debris that might fall on us. So kind of away from picture frames and away from furniture that or bookshelves, for example, that may not be adhered to the wall. So we want to be careful. Okay, I think we will change gears here a little bit. And again, if there are questions, please feel free to pop those into the chat or pop them into the Q&A. And we'll invite our friend Anita from BC Hydro to talk a little bit about how to be safe in an earthquake from a BC Hydro perspective and all of the awesome things that BC Hydro is doing to help protect infrastructure and keep us safe. So welcome, Anita.
Hi friends. I'm Anita Ansari. I'm an engineer and I work in the safety department in BC Hydro, and I'm calling in from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and in like BC terms, I'm calling in from Edmonds around Burnaby. So one of the things that I like to talk about when an earthquake happens, if you walk around and you look outside, you see our power lines are all strung up on poles and they're like held up by tension. What happens if you have a piece of string and you've got 2 like sticks holding that string and you shake it about? Well, something's going to snap. And generally it tends to be the line, and then the line falls to the ground. What should you do if you have a situation where you see a snapped line? Now, this sort of thing can happen also when there's a lot of wind and tree branches falling around, or if there's a car accident and it bumps into a pole. When a down power line is in front of you, it is what we call uncontrolled electricity. Electricity travels in the wires when things are normal and working, but when things are broken, it starts to behave in funky ways. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And instead of staying in the wires, it starts to bleed out into the ground. So to keep yourself safe, we advise people, if you see a broken power line, stay 10 meters away. That's like a bus length, a big yellow bus length away, to make sure that that electricity that's totally gone rogue and out of control isn't coming close enough to harm you. Now, what if you see something like this happen in a car accident or after an earthquake? We advise you, first of all, keep yourself safe, stay well back. 2, if you see people who are approaching or going closer and you know the deal and they don't, yell at them to stay back too. And then 3 is call 911 so that people know that this is where the problem is. Now, when we have a break in our infrastructure like that, when we have a power line that's snapped and broken and on the ground, our system knows something broke and it's in this general area, but we can't pinpoint exactly. If you call 911 and tell them, oh my God, I'm on the corner of Cambie and 10th and I saw this power line go down, then the operator for 911 will buzz us and say, Cambie and 10th, guys, go there first. And our people, our crews that respond to these emergencies will hop in their vehicle and show up there to make the area safe so that other emergency responders like firemen or ambulance workers can get in closer to take care of people who might have been hurt. So the three things, if you see it happen around you, one is stay well back. Two is tell everybody else this is uncontrolled electricity. It's a bad deal. Everybody stay back. And three is call 911 and give them your location and describe the situation. And you can get an adult to do that. Now, what if you are in a vehicle and the vehicle is near or there's a power line around it? First of all, don't panic. Like that should be, you're in a vehicle, and generally speaking, the vehicle will be the safest place for you to be in as long as there's no other big issue happening. I tell people to look at when you play a video game, sometimes there's like little small things and big things that you got to look for. What's the biggest thing? In grown-up terms, that's what's the biggest hazard? What's the biggest bad thing that's happening? If your car is like broken and smoking and you're afraid it's going to catch on fire, that's the biggest bad thing. So you got to deal with that. But if the biggest bad thing that's happening to you is you're stuck, your car's not moving, and there's a line there, stay in your vehicle. Wait for the emergency services to come. The other thing you should do is you call 911 and say, hey, I'm in a car. This thing happened. We're waiting here, so that the operators call us and let us know this is where you're supposed to come. Okay. However, if the biggest bad thing that's happening is that something's happening to the car, it's teetering on the edge of a cliff, or there's a fire in the back of the car, your biggest problem is dealing with that situation, and you might have to leave the vehicle, and it might be really close to a broken power line. In that case, you have to do what's called the jump and the shuffle away. So the jump is you stand, open up the door of the car, you prepare to jump, hold on to the car, make sure none of your body is touching the outside metal bits, just hold on to like the seat belty sides. And when you jump out of the vehicle, you try and jump far enough away that you are clear and you don't touch the vehicle again. You make sure that you land and you don't fall backwards. Now, this is assuming that there's a fallen power line on top of your car, and your biggest problem is driving you out of the car. And the reason you jump is to get away from that source of uncontrolled electricity that's behaving in a way that it shouldn't. And you land in a way that you do not like fall backwards and get closer to the uncontrolled electricity. And then the other thing that you should remember is when a fallen power line is in your vicinity, or if you jumped out of the car, you got to do what's the shuffle to shuffle away. If you take big fat steps, the electricity will say, oh, a really good pathway to get further away from my situation is to go through this person's legs. That is not good. That is a bad deal. And to prevent that, you walk in such a way, I'm going to demonstrate with my hands, that your feet are touching. So the electricity has no reason to think that short circuiting through you will allow it to get further. So you shuffle away until you're about 10 meters away, and then you continue running. So I think those are generally like the big kind of things to deal with when there is a big electricity or when there's a big earthquake or a situation. We have plans and we prepare to get all our crews out. We go deal with the biggest problems first. One of the things we ask people to do is like be patient. If you're in a spot where there's not a lot of people, or if you're in a spot where there's some damage and you want us to come, you have to remember we're going to first go deal with the big problems, which are making sure that there's electricity for hospitals, for other centers of town, and we'll work our way out as fast as we can. So suppose you're at home and there's an earthquake and your power is knocked out. You got to be patient and wait possibly hours, possibly a few days, as we work our way to fixing things over to you and deal with the biggest problem first. So I'm here for any questions you might have. And yeah, I'll pop a photo in the chat of how to shuffle away that you guys can review later.
That's my favorite thing, the safety shuffle. I was telling Anita the other day, I was watching a show, and it was of course it was about wildfires. And the person did the safety shuffle. That's what we call it, get out of harm's way. And I thought of my friend Anita right away because she tells us that all the time. Okay, so I've got a poll question. I'm just going to pop it in the chat just to make it easier. And so I'll ask our teachers to help facilitate an answer. So you can pick A, B, or C. If you come across down power lines, you should call 911 and stand back at least a school bus length. B, stay in your car if you're driving. Or C, move closer and take a picture. And I know Anita already gave you the answer, so she knows what the answer is. But we will give folks just a minute to pop that note in the chat. And I shared with Anita yesterday that last week I was the person who had to call 911 because there was a line. In the end, I think it was a cable line, but it was wrapped around the top of the hydro lines and it was hanging down, and somebody riding their bike or walking by could have touched it. And I wasn't sure if it wasn't safe. And so I called 911 and I did ask fire to respond, and they did. And they called the power company to be sure that it was de-electrified before they cut the line. So it is really important that if you see a down power line that you take action. So that is a good thing. Oh, I like this. Okay. We've got Miss Laxton's class says both A and B. Very good. Miss Scholler's class, if you get a second to pop in the chat, that's great. And so Anita, do you want to give us the correct answer?
Yeah, A and B are both correct. Like, it depends on where you are, right? If you
Yep.
come across it while you're walking, you stand back at least a school bus length. And if you're in a vehicle, you stay in your car unless there's another big fat reason why you should be getting out. Like, look at what the biggest danger to you is and deal with that first.
Good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great info. And Anita has posted a video how to do the shuffle in the chat, so you can take a look at that as well. So I think we'll change gears here, and I'm going to invite my friend Jeri from the Juan Fuca Regional District to just share with us some of the personal preparedness tips that we need to be thinking about. So each one of us has a responsibility to ensure that we're ready in our home, that we're ready at school. My daughter, when she goes to school, she's got a little mini pouch, and it has emergency supplies in it. And so, you know, that's her personal preparedness that she takes with her to school every day. I have a kit in my car. I know all of my colleagues on the line today have one in their car, and we have some at home. So Jeri, what is the best way for us to start thinking about being safe and being prepared really for any emergency?
First, I had to unmute myself. That's preparedness right there. So hi, I'm Jeri. I'm actually calling in from East Fuca, which is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. I'm in the traditional territory of the Shawnee people, or Beecher Bay Band. And I live here. Half the time I get to work here, and I play around here. And I love where I live. It's a most excellent place. So, you know, as mentioned earlier, Allison talked about having an emergency kit, and John talked about having an emergency kit. And sometimes people find that really overwhelming, right? How do I get this kit together? This doesn't have to be done in one day, in one weekend. A lot of times the stuff that we need in an emergency kit are found right in our house. Most of us have a flashlight. Most of us have canned goods. Most of us have a can opener, a manual can opener. We have different things. We have first aid kits. These are all things that could go into an emergency kit. And when I've been thinking about emergency kits, when I'm out and about talking to people, I'm finding now more and more people are kind of strapped for space. Where do I put this? Like, this sounds like a big thing that I need to have. And nowadays, more people are living in townhouses and condominiums and manufactured homes that don't have a lot of space. They don't have a basement. They don't have a huge area where they've designated to store something like this. But there's always a solution to a problem. So one of the things that I think is a really good tip is using a suitcase. Almost everybody has a suitcase. You can pop your emergency stuff in your suitcase and put it back where you normally have that stored, which might be, again, might be in your very small closet or under a bed. But it seems to work out really well for people that are living in much smaller areas. As well, families are different now. You know, at one time we were, you know, the family usually was together and you were in one home, but now many of us live with, I spend half of the time with my mom, half of the time with my dad. So again, thinking about having that smaller kit, and for a student, if you're spending half of your time at both parents' place, using it just a smaller travel-on bag to have emergency supplies for you at your parents' house. And, you know, because it really, space is one of those things, and I'm hearing that more and more and more. So I just wanted to bring that up. There are lots of good resources as to the things that you can have in your emergency kit. But one of the things, you know, after a big earthquake in particular, it will be a very stressful time. So we like to think about the things that we can put in there that give us comfort. My colleagues here know that I like to have what I call the emergency bag of potato chips. I have a few different items that bring me comfort, but I've started with another new thing, and I'm going to just pull it up. Comfort is a lot of things, and I also like chocolate. Get this where you can see it. It's a s'mores kit. And what I like about this, everything is packaged. If you had to put it in a suitcase, you're not taking up too much room. Everything is sort of protected the way it's in this package. But you have your chocolate, you have a cookie, and for those who like a marshmallow, you have that. And if you had to, you could probably make a s'mores, but I just like the idea of having something like that. What I do, and I just bought this one, I always write the date. So I'll write, it's May, and the year, and then I know 6 months if it's still there to go and get rid of it. By
get rid of it, you mean have a snack, Jeri?
Yes, I said consume it. I can consume it. Another thing, you know, when we do have an earthquake, there are going to be some resources that are really important actually for your parents. And those kind of resources are having enough power for them to be able to use their phones to get emergency messaging, or for them to text. So we're so used to everybody, including, you know, our kids, using their cell phones, you know, to occupy time to play games. We are definitely going to have power outages after an earthquake. So as much as we like, and I do like this, and I know John does as well, our power banks, you know, it's probably better to let our parents use the power bank, you know, even though we want to be able to play our game. So this is when we have to go old school. So your emergency kit should have things, and this is right out of my emergency kit. In my Ziploc bag, I have a deck of cards. I have family charades, and that sounds really silly, but I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun. I have a puzzle in there. I get these things from garage sales. It's a great time of the year to get items for your emergency kit. I also have a smaller one that has all sorts of different games in it. Again, garage sale, because you're going to want to be occupied. I'm sure your parents will put you to work, but you know, you have to have some sort of fun to relieve tension and such. So, you know, being able to use the traditional games instead of the ones that we might use on our cell phones. That cell phone that your parents have is so very important for them to be able to, you know, text message and receive messages. So we don't want to be interfering with that. We don't want to be using our phones. We'll mention this again. It takes up too much bandwidth, but a text message, and this is a really good thing about text messages, you can send a text message. You're probably not going to get an answer right away, but they sit in a queue and they will eventually reach the place they're supposed to be. So we like to leave that open for mom and dad. What else do I have here? John talked about having a flashlight. And, you know, I do love the traditional old flashlight, but I am a super fan of headlamps. And I have one that I can charge. It's rechargeable, and I have one with batteries, and I make sure I have the other batteries. But the beauty of the headlamp, and I will demonstrate like so, you notice my hands are free. I can do things. If you're just stuck with a regular flashlight, it's quite difficult to maneuver and get around things. So I just find it very handy, and it's a great thing to use during power outages. And believe me, we get a lot of power outages where I live, so I use that a lot. My other handy thing, because of power outages, and this is new to me, is a solar panel on the top light, and it also has a little area where I can actually recharge some items. So this is a good one to have. If you don't have a power bank, you can charge your phone and a few other things. And I'm kind of stoked with this one. And I have used this now 4 times this year. 4. So one of the
investment, Jeri, good investment.
Well, and this one I did pay, like it was brand new. It cost me $25 and tax. But a lot of the items I get, seriously, I do buy them at garage sales. And one of the things that we like to promote to people, if you are prepared for an earthquake, you really are prepared for everything else. My kit was developed with earthquake in mind, but ask me how many times I've used it this year because of power outages. So, then I'm ready for everything.
And I think that's the message we hope that folks take away today is, I have started, and I know my colleagues do this too, and that is, I've started giving emergency preparedness items for birthdays or holidays or Mother's Day, Father's Day, Grandparents' Day, just because it's Tuesday, whatever. One of my favorite items is I have this little fancy Swiss Army knife, but it's not a knife, right? But it's all the tools inside. It looks like a credit card, and I ordered it on Amazon. And so that was a gift that I gave to people close to me during the holiday period. And it's great. And it's never been taken away. I keep it in my purse. So it's always, right there. Jeri shared her s'mores kit, but I want to just give you, mine is candy. So I like to have candy. I also like chips. Storm chips are a thing, but candy is fun. These are great. If you have somebody in your family that has a dietary concern or a food allergy, for example, my husband happens to be allergic to dairy. So I use these vegan bliss balls, for example. These are in my kit as well. They take up a little more space, but at least then I know that he has something that he can also enjoy. So these are things we have to think about. Jeri, I know you like to talk about pet preparedness also usually. So if we were thinking about, we have a dog or a cat or maybe a scaled or furry friend, what would you suggest to keep our pets, to be thinking about for our pets?
Well, one of the things in particular is always having food stored in there. And again, writing the date on it and switching it out. So one of the things is right now we're in emergency preparedness week. And 6 months from now, it'll be I call it shakeout week. Yeah. So there's 2 times of the year that I actually go through my emergency kit and switch things out. So for pet food, I would always have some dried food in there, obviously some canned food. I also have the collapsible food dishes, just in case I wouldn't be able to stay there. I can take that with me. It's all in one thing. I like to have an extra leash, and sometimes, truth is, even in my car, I don't have a dog right now, but I've got a couple of leashes in my car because you never know when there's an emergency and somebody needs one. I recently had to respond to something, and we needed a leash, and I for the person to help out. So I was able to just go through my car and grab one. So having a spare leash, identification, having a picture actually of your pet. So this is one of the times where I know most people just like to keep a picture on their phones, but your phone may go dead. Having an actual picture of your pet, so that should your pet, get lost during, an emergency, you've got some way of identifying them.
That's such a good tip. I love the leash idea too. I always learn something new. I mean, we've been doing these for a long time, and we trade ideas amongst us, this little group here. But holy smokes, every time I think, oh, that's such a good idea. I need to do that. So I do have an extra leash, but I'm going to put some in my car. What a great idea. And you can just, buy those at the dollar store. You don't need a fancy leash as your emergency leash, right? We recently had a situation where my fire alarm went off in my house, and my dog is terrified of the fire alarm, and he jumped our fence. And so a neighbor, if they had had a leash, could have just clipped him. And that wasn't something I thought of. So I really like that idea. I think if you're, out and about, and again, we're about looking after our neighbors and helping one another. And so if, if the dog is lost and you're there, you might be able to, to provide that support. I think that's such a great tip.
You'd be surprised, not just during, saying, an earthquake, but during other disasters, or even things just as simple as fireworks going off. Well, you'll have dogs, cats take off. So again, having a physical picture of your pet, it's a big deal. And then also having leashes, spare leashes. You just never know.
Such good tips. Thanks, Jeri. Appreciate that. We'll change gears here a little. Got a last few minutes, and there was a great question from a student from Miss Laxton's class. And the question, and so this is for Allison, has the earthquake early warning system that BC is getting, has it failed in other places?
Failed.
Failed.
Oh. I don't think it's ever really failed. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work perfectly because it's a fully automated system. It's just using a heartbeat of data to try and analyze an earthquake. And normally when I analyze an earthquake, I'm looking at, maybe a few minutes worth of data in order to get a really good location and magnitude and all that. But if you're doing it just with a snapshot of data, it's more tricky, especially when that's an automated system and not a person. So sometimes it's not perfect. Sometimes it will say there's an earthquake when there isn't one. Usually it's just being tricked by noise. That doesn't happen very often. Sometimes it will miss an earthquake when there is one, but generally speaking, it works quite well. The thing is, if an earthquake, if an early warning happens and there's no earthquake, well, you got the chance to practice. Generally speaking, they're not really harmful. And if it missed one, well, hopefully, when you felt that first bit of shaking, you still do the drop cover hold on. But if it just, they're generally fairly reliable systems, despite the fact that they are fully automated. It's going to be launched in BC actually tomorrow. But don't tell everyone. It's going to be launched in BC tomorrow, and then it's going to be launched in Ontario and Quebec, Eastern Ontario and Southern Quebec area, in the autumn. So we're really hitting the high risk areas of Canada. Of course, BC is the highest risk. And then Ontario and Quebec actually fairly decent risk, but a lot of people don't know it. So
Great,
it's exciting
awesome.
things to come. And I saw there were a couple other questions too.
Yeah, so I'll ask these questions just because not everybody might be able to read them. So Allison, for you or John, what was the largest earthquake in BC and when was it? And how often I'm going to ask you two at once. And how often do earthquakes happen in the Fraser Canyon, the Boston Bar area specifically?
John, did you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can jump in there. The really good questions. The largest earthquake that we know of in Canada and here in British Columbia was a magnitude 9 earthquake off the coast of Vancouver Island. That was January the 26th of the year 1700. And that exact date and time comes from Japan, where a tsunami came ashore and caused damage, and there were written records. But that day and time also fits perfectly with Indigenous oral traditions that describe strong shaking, landslides, a tsunami along the west coast of Vancouver Island on a winter's night. So it all came together. But that's the largest earthquake we've seen. And that earthquake had a rupture length of more than 1,000 kilometers from Vancouver Island all the way down to Northern California, followed by aftershocks for months, as we know happens from subduction zone earthquakes around the world. So that's the largest earthquake. We've also had magnitude 7s here on Vancouver Island and in Washington State. And in terms of the Boston Bar area, as you move inland away from those active faults, the earthquakes drop off really quickly. So we do see earthquakes in the interior, but they tend to be much smaller and much less frequent. So earthquakes in the immediate area of Boston Bar pretty rare. We do see small ones through the interior of British Columbia every few months, but and often too small to be felt. So they do happen, but they're really tiny. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a larger earthquake in the future, because it could just be that they're so rare, they're thousands of years apart, that we haven't seen a large earthquake in the interior. So we can't rule it out. It is really important to have a plan, have a kit, and know what to do when you feel strong shaking. So rare events in the interior, but not impossible.
Good. Thanks.
No, they do happen. And the other thing to think about is you don't spend all of your time at your home necessarily. A lot of people come to the coast, on holiday. They maybe go surfing at Long Beach, or they do things like that. And then they're in an area that has more earthquakes. So it's good to know what to do because of the other places you go in your life.
think
Good to know.
That's an important reminder. And I always like to remind people, but we don't see the dotted line between communities too, right? You go to a hockey tournament or a soccer tournament, or you're away on vacation, you still have to have kind of that awareness of your surroundings. That's really, really important. And be aware of the hazards that might be in the places where you're visiting. We've got there's two more questions in here. I'm gonna throw over to our Seismo friends here. And John, I think you sort of touched on this a little bit about how do we calculate the size of an earthquake. We talked a little bit about magnitude, for example, but also how long it might take to feel the aftershocks, or how quickly the aftershocks come.
Sure. So calculating the magnitude of an earthquake, as seismologists, we use the recordings, the shaking level at different locations. Really large earthquakes are going to be recorded all around the world. So instruments around the world will record magnitude 7 or 8 or 9 earthquakes. The magnitude is related directly to the length of the fault and the amount of slip along a fault. So that tells us, so we can use different methods. We can actually map out a fault zone and say it ruptured 100 kilometers, and we see a fence that's been offset by 3 meters. So we can actually calculate the size of an earthquake. But it really comes, for us, it really comes from the seismic data that we collect. So that's really important. And I've forgotten the other question.
The aftershocks. How quickly might we feel those aftershocks?
Aftershocks. Yeah. So that's a really good question. They can start immediately. They can start right after the main earthquake. The larger an earthquake is, the larger the area that will experience aftershocks, and typically the larger the aftershocks will be. So they tend to drop off in time. Small earthquakes, magnitude 5 or 6 earthquakes, we're looking at aftershocks for perhaps hours or a couple of days. For a magnitude 8 or 9 earthquake, we're talking about aftershocks that can be very, very large, very damaging, and that can continue for months or even years. So it is good to be aware of that and what to expect. It's a very frightening. I experienced that in Chile after a magnitude 8 earthquake. It is really frightening to just keep feeling the ground shake for days and days and days, and having things fall off shelves. So good question. And yeah, be aware, be prepared for aftershocks.
For sure. And sometimes we might see things destabilize, right? We might see, a house that sustained some damage, and then those subsequent aftershocks, we still have to be really aware of our surroundings. I think that's an important message. So, really excellent questions to Miss Thaxton's class. This is great. And thank you for participating. We'll just take this opportunity to ask if there's any final questions. Allison's posted some good info here about the 7.8 quake off of Haida Gwaii, and that we continue to feel those aftershocks for many years. So we'll say thank you to everybody that is here with us today. We're grateful for you, and thank you to our panel for, again, sharing your knowledge. It's always great to learn more in some new and different ways. I always love Jeri's items and our chats with Anita and Allison and John. So thank you all so very much for being here today, and we will see you soon. Oh, I've got a question from Sarah here as well. Sorry, from Miss Thaxton. If a tsunami has ever happened in BC. So I think our friends in Haida Gwaii. Good question. Go ahead, Allison.
Well, of course, John mentioned how with the 1700 earthquake, the magnitude 9 off Vancouver Island, that of course caused a tsunami, which impacted Japan as well as the coastal communities who are in our region. The 2012 earthquake off Haida Gwaii caused a tsunami that impacted the west coast of mostly Moresby Island. Thankfully, no one lives on the west coast of Moresby Island. It happened in late October, so no one is camping there. So that was really good timing. But yeah, they found seaweed in the branches of trees. They found logs that had been moved. They found fish on the forest floor. And it indicated that there were a few meters of inundation of the height of the wave that impacted the west coast of Haida Gwaii from that earthquake. There's certainly evidence of other tsunamis that have happened in our region, and it certainly can happen again. So, you know, it is something that to consider, not just that shaking that you might experience, but, you know, after that shaking stops, do you need to get to high ground? If the shaking was strong, if it was difficult to stand, if it lasted a minute or so, you probably should get away from coastlines and up and inland. And that's something I think about, as I said before, when I'm at Long Beach, I'm thinking about my tsunami evacuation route. Where am I going to go if there's an earthquake? And just, you know, when I'm in the waterfront regions around Vancouver Island, it's just good to know where to go, and to know that before an earthquake happens. Don't think that after when an earthquake happens, okay, now where should I go? Where are the maps? It's, you know, you should know beforehand so that you have that knowledge. It gives you that sort of comfort.
Yeah, that know before you go message is important, and as we like to say, the ground shaking is your tsunami warning. So that's really, really important. Okay, so just some notes here from Miss Laxton's class. So the shuffle the shuffle of your
I
life.
love it.
Prepare for hazards. Earthquake ain't a piece of cake. Stay safe, be prepared, no quakes. Oh, love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much, and thanks for your fun participation, Miss Laxton's class. We appreciate you being here today. And we'll say thank you. So thanks again to our panel, and thanks to Miss Laxton's class and our other colleagues that were with us earlier on. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.